Bante Subhuti. This is the third interview that we've done. Thank you for being back on the show that we're making. Thank you for doing this interview.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. It's actually really nice to document some of what I've been doing here in Hawaii, and or for my whole life actually, or my whole life as a monk. Yeah.
So last time we talked a bit about money, about going on alms.
Yeah.
So, do you think that handling money is sinful? Do you think it's wrong?
For a monk?
In general, like, do you think money is the root of all evil?
Oh. Well, it could be, but for lay people, it's okay. I mean, it's okay. We live off of people who use money, but it can be a problem, and it takes a lot of control for one to use it responsibly. I have one friend, and he lives almost like a monk, and I have a couple of friends actually who do that. And but there's one friend of mine. He has this temple that he built, and it's got all these really cool crystals inside it. And he lives sort of like a monk, but he uses money. He manages his property, and he does things in some sense like a normal person would, but he also lives a very recluse life. And but he doesn't have any precepts which he has agreed to. So when one becomes a monk, they agree to these precepts. And it's very clear, even at the novice stage, at the beginner's monk stage, that there's 10 precepts, and that should sum up what the monk life is all about. And the 10th one is not using money, to refrain from using money. And so that is actually one of the precepts that separates a strict yogi from a monk. So you can have a lay person who, on the full and new moon days, decides to become like a yogi, a practitioner, and follow a little bit more strict rules. And even so, they can practice very comfortably. But they didn't agree to the 8 rules that they agreed to, the Aposata Sila. It has nothing to do with giving up money or giving up the use of money. But the next level of rules is for a novice monk. And actually the one of the long rules that the lay people take is broken up into 2 rules. And so it's really 9 rules, and then the 10th one is money. And this is what distinguishes a monk from a serious layperson from a monk, if we're just taking into the rules into effect. But there's other distinguishing characteristics besides that. But I consider it a major distinguishing characteristic, because when one uses money, one can get caught up in the same circle or rat race or whatever that the rest of the world gets used in. And some people use money and they don't get caught up in that, and maybe some monks can do that, or maybe a lot of monks do that, but they are definitely breaking the rules, and they know that they're breaking the rules. And we had discussed the benefits of following all the rules, and they don't get to taste. They don't get to taste that life that I've explained in the
So
past 2
what
weeks.
do you think is the purpose of this rule?
Well, I said before, it keeps you dependent on that rule, coupled with not offering, not having, not eating food that hasn't been offered, and not eating food that has been stored overnight. So these rules keep one dependent on lay people, and they keep the check and balance system going, and they keep one appreciative. And we don't just behave for, for our food. It's actually to help us with our practice. And whether that practice is a study or meditation, it should be a little bit of both. One should always meditate, and one should always do a little bit of study. So whatever the focus is, so some people tend to be meditation monks, and some people tend to be pariyatti monks or study monks, scholar monks. They should still incorporate. If you're a meditation monk, you should still do some study, and if you're a scholar monk, you should still do some meditation. In either case, by not using money and by behaving, you have less things to do. You have less things to do and more time to focus on your goal.
Do you think that the rules for the monks of not using money are more like a reiteration of unspoken expectations of what it means to wear the title or accept the lifestyle that you're portraying as a monk in society?
Yeah. Absolutely. When the Buddha created the monks order, he didn't have any rules until 20 years later, if I remember correctly from my studies. During the first 20 years, there were no rules, and the monks just behaved and fit that way.
So they didn't use money. Nobody used money. None of the monks at that first 20 years would use money.
I'm not sure. I don't think so. But when things became problems, the Buddha actually created rules as time went along. And this is how the Patimokkha, the catalog of rules, was actually made. And they were made one by one, and sometimes they were readjusted. And so that's how it was. And so so I believe that there is an idea in our heads, that's that monks aren't supposed to use money. I always had that idea in my head. I don't know about you, but and I was very shocked to find out the first time I saw a monk using money. I was very shocked. It just wasn't part of my idea or perception of what a monk was about. And unfortunately, it's when every monk accepts money, he's teaching the lay people the wrong type of Vinaya Dhamma. He's teaching them the wrong things that should be done and the wrong ways.
So they're redefining what a monk is.
Yeah, but but we teach through our actions, and especially in our interactions. So we teach by our actions, but also in our interactions with the lay people. And the whole dynamic changes. You can be an independent monk. You can teach, and you can be a lecturer who still gets donations. It's very rare for monks to charge for their Dhamma talks, but you become sort of a lecturer. That becomes your career. And then you start having credit cards, you start driving, and you can do you can do a lot of things, and you start having bank accounts, and it you know, you could end up retiring as a monk. You could have, I mean, there's a lot of different things that can happen once you have money. So I might be leaving Hawaii soon, okay? And today I just gave someone wanted to bring me food on their mother's anniversary, the death of the anniversary of her mother. And she says, I really want to give you something. And I said, look, I might be leaving soon, and I don't want to collect anything. And so I'm sorry, if you want, you can bring honey. I told her, I said, why don't you bring a consumable, like honey, and don't give me more than 7 days worth, because I have to throw it out after that or give it away. And so and then I told her, I said, you can make an afternoon drink. You can bring that too. And but I don't want to collect anything, and just have that as your way of making merit. And I told them, that you can have, if I used money, I guess it wouldn't matter. If I was leaving, I just have a bank account, or I just have bills in my wallet or something like that, and you could travel with it very easily. And there's no limit. And the Buddha wanted us to limit our possessions, and already I have way more possessions than the Buddha sort of allocated, But still, even so, there are very few monks who just have, very, very little, very, very, very little. And there's one monk in Australia, and he puts everyone else to shame. His name is Jason Chan. He goes by his lay name, and
Yeah, so we just had a technical issue, glitch. You were talking about some monk in Australia who puts everybody to shame.
Yeah, there's about the the possessions. There's one monk. His name is Jason Chan, and he goes by his lay name. But he's a walking monk, and he has nothing. And I mean, he really trusts. He's walked up and down the coast of Australia, the east coast of Australia. I don't know how many times, and he doesn't even have a water bottle, and he just relies on people giving him water, and of course food, and he's always eaten every day. And he's actually from my monastery in Sri Lanka, and he lives in the forest without a mosquito net. He'll just go in the middle of the forest and just live there. And he definitely puts me to shame. And he inspires me. So we have someone to look up to. We have different levels.
Wow.
So I'm not perfect in my ways, and but he's all by himself. I mean, he's in a class all by himself. I actually went and I remember I went and stayed with him a couple nights without a mosquito net, and we're just sleeping in the forest without a mosquito net in Sri Lanka. And he does this every day, and he just keeps walking around the monastery. It's 6,000 acres at this monastery, and so you could actually take a week walking around it. It's a whole mountain, couple sides of the mountain, and he walks around the mountain. He was walking around the mountain and staying a couple days each side of the mountain, and he didn't want to get attached. And I did that. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to do what he does. And even so, I could have been living almost in a tent for almost a year. Right now, I'm in a house, and it's a big luxury. But later I could be in a tent again. I've only been living in a house for 2 weeks.
So
But
actually,
yeah.
I mean, to me, this brings to mind the Buddha's, I don't remember the name, but Buddha's discourse on asceticism. And
Okay.
where I think he basically, he says something I think the lesson from it is something about the middle path. And he says, well, if certain Brahmin, or I don't remember exactly the terminology he uses, if somebody, let's say, stands on one leg, or does this ascetic practice or that ascetic practice, does that
Make him enlightened?
make him enlightened? And the answer is no, it doesn't. Well, if he doesn't eat food, or eats from one bowl, or eats one time a day, or eats 2 spoonfuls a day, or 3 spoonfuls a day, or whatever, like doesn't accept food from this people, or doesn't accept food from that people, like, and the answer is always no. Right. So the question becomes, no doubt that these are difficult things, like, and how far do we want to push our asceticism, and even what is the point of the asceticism? So like when people, I mean, I think naturally we tend to admire when people do things that we find difficult. I mean, I know I do. So like when I see somebody who's overcome problems that I find, I'm like, wow, how did that person manage to do that? Like I have respect, admiration for that. And so I think there's something about a monastic lifestyle that's appealing generally to lay people because of the like renunciation aspect.
Right.
But the example that you bring up of somebody who takes it up a notch, then I'm thinking, well, okay, what's the point, and where do you draw the line? Because you can always go more extreme, you can get more ascetic, and then you can also move. The Buddha was invited to certain palace here and there. Sometimes he would accept, sometimes he would reject the invitations. Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, what this monk is doing is perfectly fine. It's within the realm, actually, of being a monk. And as things got more established, we had monasteries. Okay, and so one time, Venerable Devadatta, he tried to create a schism, and there were five rules that he wanted to incorporate. One was like living under a tree. One was only going for alms. Okay, and and then there was another one, only wearing rag robes. Another one was I'm not sure. The last one was being vegetarian. So it's just the fourth one's not coming to me. But I can't on the spot. I can't think of it right now. But there's one that's missing. But basically, he wanted everyone to become a serious ascetic. Okay, and the Buddha said, if you want to follow these practices, you can, but it's not required. So the only thing that was different was vegetarianism. So if you have seen, heard, or suspected that the meat was killed for you, then you should ask or you should refuse. If you suspect, you need to ask, and if you know, you just refuse, flat out refuse. So in the beginning, though, the Buddha, we eat just to sustain our body. We have a chant. We have chants that we do, there are four requisites: the robes, the alms food, the lodging, and the medicine. And we should chant these every day, and I usually chant these every day. And what the chants invoke are, that we want to keep the bugs off of us. We want to keep the sun, and we want to keep the hot and the cold off of us, the elements. We want to be protected to some extent. And then we want to cover our body as well, so we're not shameful. And the same is for the shelter. We need to protect ourselves from the elements. We need to be protected from the bugs and the creeping things, and so it's just in the chant, we the same as for food. We want to have just enough nourishment. We don't want to become fat and intoxicated. And for the medicine, we only want the medicine to cure the illness. But sometimes we're given luxurious things, okay? And we still should reflect only of the bare necessity of what we're using. So right now I'm in a fancy house. I'm in one of my donors' houses, and normally I've been living in a tent, okay? And I have to reflect that this is, whatever this is that I'm staying at, I do this to shield myself from the elements, and I direct my mind at the bare necessity, even though I might be, for the past 2 weeks, I've been living in somewhat of a luxurious place. So
that's
the middle path is, yeah. The middle path is it can be that you at least take up your bare necessities, okay? And that monk in Australia does that. And if you're given something better, you reflect on the bare necessities.
So it seems, I think the idea of the middle path or the middle way is, as well as the idea of bare necessities, is interpreted very differently. Because like for me, for example, I could say, well, what is my reference point for what my needs are? Is it like really comfortable? Is it like a little bit less comfortable? Do I need,
Right.
or because like, or is my bare necessities just above survival? Like as long as I'm surviving, that's my bare necessities. So like, what is the criteria for the needs?
It's difficult. I remember when I first came to Hawaii, okay? It was 3 days before these big rains that like hit the newspapers and stuff, that made international news. And I was at this beach park called Hyanna, and my tent, it was really windy where I was. The storm was coming, and it was really windy, and I had this big tent, and I just it wasn't working, and I ended up sleeping in a collapsed tent, and I ended up sleeping on top of a collapsed tent and just having a tarp over me, okay? And it was windy and rainy, and so you could only lie down in that thing, okay? But I was protected from the elements, And then I went over to the pavilion, and it was windy and rainy, and the rain was blowing sideways, and it was cold. It was Hawaii, and I was just freezing, I was just, oh, it's so cold. And so I reflected. I said, how did the monks do this? How did the monks do this? It was like my first or second night on the island, and I didn't know how I would be able to do this. And you have homeless people, and and a lot of them are, you know, doing lots of drugs, or they're you know, have maybe some mental problems, or they're just doing a lot of drugs, and they're immune to the, it seems like they're immune to the elements. And maybe they're, I guess they get disturbed too from the elements too. And here I was, you know, just like freezing, you know, and I'm like, how do people do this? And but I survived it, you know, I got through it, and who knows, you know, maybe if I continued that way, I would. Well, I did continue. I did continue that way, but I got a new tent. Okay, so I at least had a tent shelter for myself, and um, so yeah, I mean, I guess people have a stronger stamina, but sometimes you're left to your circumstances, and you just make it work. And so what I'm doing in Hawaii right now is a lot of work, but it's what I do in order to survive. And there is a lot of reward for me. And I found out that the more convenient my life is, the less rewarding it is, and the less fulfilling it is. And maybe this works with lay people too. I don't know, but I know that I really feel like I earn my keep, you know, and maybe because I have to work harder to get my keep or something like that, you know, to get my food. The only thing I need to do is get my food and have a place to sleep, and it's the only thing I really need to do. And one day, you know, someone said, "How was your day today?" And I said, "Well, I got food today." And he started laughing because because I mean, I was completely serious too. And he started laughing. He just let out this old belly laugh, and he says, "That's all you need, really. You know, like, I mean, that's all you really need. You know, and all this other stuff we don't really need." And
Right.
so I don't know where we draw the line. You know, it's I guess it comes from, you know, taking risks and trying to put yourself on a lower level. And I could put myself further down the ascetic path until I match the that Australian monk.
Well, the
So
goal
what he's
certainly,
doing,
I mean, the goal isn't asceticism, right? Asceticism
right,
either helps you or it can take you off the path as well.
yeah, but a lot of times we don't even have a chance to do that. But meditation centers are geared, you know, meditation centers are geared towards cultivation. You know, it's like a hatchery for little chicks. You know, and so they custom make it to meet the requirements necessary for meditation. And there's a brand new meditation center in a cool area of like cool temperate zone of Burma, and they have, you know, buffet food, and it's really healthy food, and you get to choose whatever you want. There's raw vegetables, there's cooked vegetables. Um, they have good kutis. These are like little meditation huts, and the temperature is good. And they also have medical, and they have good robes. So everything is provided, and this is also another way to. The goal is to be able to meditate and get enlightenment, and this is very important. And
So,
you know, I would like to actually go back to the meditation center and go back there as much as I like this life. a part of me wants to go back to the meditation center because it takes a lot of time to simply get my food. Like I said, he said, "How was your day?" And I said, "Well, I got my food." And sometimes it takes a long time. And we've discussed a little bit about that in the first interview, about how food can take a lot of time. But when I'm doing that, I'm practicing loving kindness. We should make a practice out of it. We should do something. It's not just like trying to get your food. It's using these opportunities or these disturbances to work on our practice. But in either case, when you don't get what you want, you can work with that. And so it is very beneficial. And for me, I don't get a chance to teach when I usually live in Sri Lanka or Myanmar, and I'm in these big industrial, these commercialized monasteries. They have like over 100 monks there. And there's no way that I can teach. Nobody speaks the language. They have professional monks there who give the Dhamma discourses. And we're just there to meditate. And so here I get to make a lot of good karma, by teaching. It's a very rare opportunity for me. And so that's why I really love it. And just about everybody who helps me in one way or another every single day gets a little bit of a teaching. Even if I just walk away and I say what comes around goes around, I consider that a teaching. And one lady, she came to my one of my classes, and she says, I saw you on the street one day, and I wanted to talk to you, but we were driving, and we were going too fast. And then I saw you another time, and then she said that she saw a little poster for the talk, and then she says, I have to go, and so then she came to the teaching, and she learned a real lot. And then at the very end, they her and her husband pulled out some money. They're like, we want to make a donation. I'm like, no, can't make one. And it's cool. And I think in the end, they get really inspired by that. And a matter of fact, he said, the husband said to me, you're a real bhikkhu. He was Indian. And he said that after I didn't accept any money, and I said, if you want to give food, I'll need it tomorrow. It's beyond the food giving time. But if you want to give food tomorrow, you can make a donation tomorrow. And he was happy about that. And it inspires people. Some people say you need to be polite and accept what people give and then just throw it away, or give it turn it over to the kapya, turn it over to the helper, But that's not right either. And it doesn't inspire, and it doesn't get put to proper use, because once a monk accepts money, it's not good for him. It's not suitable for him. And this is one of the problems with monks who touch money, who accept money. They teach the wrong thing. They don't inspire people. In every moment, they're dealing with unallowable things that will lead to bad karma for them, unfortunately.
So can you talk a little about that? I mean, using some strong words, the people, I mean, it probably makes some sense to you, but hearing it sounds like, terrible. Can you elaborate a little bit? I mean, I understand from the perspective of social designations and disrespecting a title, which is supposed to be like a holy title, and then you're kind of creating like certain reverberations in society where a monk becomes something other than what it was supposed to be, or something like that. But what about like personally creating harm to oneself? Like, what are you thinking?
Well, there's a set of rules. There's a class of rules called Nisaggiya Pacitya. Okay, and anything that is Nisagya Pachitya means that it needs to be relinquished and confessed, and it's an unallowable item. Okay, and if we have respect for the Buddha, and monks should have super high respect for the Buddha, right?
Of
We
course.
should follow the rules of the house. Okay, and it's very clear that that if you die with offenses, okay, there's a Pali phrase, okay, that says that if you die with offenses, you'll go to the hell realm or the animal realm, and so the problem is, like, suppose you don't pay attention to the time and you unintentionally eat after high noon. Okay, that's one offense. Okay, actually, every bite you take is an offense. And it doesn't matter whether or not you had intention or not. This is what they call an asanya offense. This means there's no perception is not a mitigating factor for the offense. These when you're eating this stuff, this is beyond the time. This is not good. It's not good for you, because the monk, it's one of the rules that's very strict. It's very strict and about eating after high noon. But whatever it is, that offense is finished. That offense is finished, okay? But in a Sagya Pachitya rule, this class of offenses where things need to be forfeited and confessed, okay? This offense is still creating problems. Just like every bite of eating food will not be good for you, okay? It's breaking an offense. It has bad negative karma, okay? But when you have something, you have money, you have a telephone that you bought, or you have a car that you bought, or you have anything that you bought. People buy their own robes, people buy their own bowls, and the Buddha said that if you buy iron and you make a bowl, it's the great unallowable. Even the food you collect with that bowl is not allowable. Okay, and so everything, as long as you have this property, you can never be pure. Actually, you can never be pure. We have what we call an apati desana. Apati desana is to confess your offenses, and some people think that if you just spit out the formula, that you become pure again. And we do this every 2 weeks when we have the Patimokkha, when we have the recitation of the rules. The monks are supposed to come, and everyone does this confession, and then everyone goes into the hall, and they hear someone recite the rules. And if it's just a Pali formula, if it's just something we say in another language, it might not have any meaning. But if we were to look at the meaning, it says, the first one is, Venerable Sir, I have all these rules that I make open to you. Okay, and then the senior monk says, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And then that means, well done, well done, well done. And then he says, Venerable Sir, I confess all my offenses to you. And the monk who's confessing, he has those offenses in his mind. He should have at least one in his mind. And then the monk says, do you see you're wrong? And then that monk replies, he says, yes, I see my wrong. Do you see your offenses? He says, yes, I see them. And then he says, will you restrain yourself in the future? Will you not do this again? And the monk has to say, yes, I won't do this again in the future. So if you have money in your pocket, if you have a wallet in your room, or if you have a wallet and someone's holding it for you while you go to a meditation center that has rules, And the apatidesana, this whole procedure where a monk becomes pure, this confessional procedure, is invalid because it makes one it affects one's purity.
Okay, so
Not
I want to
purity.
actually go back for a minute
Okay.
to another earlier topic. You talked about when we talked about asceticism and pain, and
Yeah.
um, there you said there's arahants who don't feel pain, and I know that like
I'm sorry.
there's this.
They feel pain. They feel pain. I'm sorry. That's a mistake. They feel pain, but they're unaffected by it. They're unshaken.
Okay,
They
so
do feel pain. Sorry about that.
yeah, well, yeah, because there is these, mythological ideas of the sage, the master that is, superhero because nothing affects them. Um, and so people will strive to be, this sage, this master, and their criteria of whether or not they've attained mastery is how much they're affected by pain. But then when I reflect on the Buddha's story, we assume that he's an arahant, right? And then
Yes. Yeah.
we know that there are instances that when he would have to change his posture because of back problems. So
Mm-hmm.
so we have to I mean, to me it seems that there might be at least the mythological idea of, the master who is beyond pain might not be quite the same thing as the reality. Like if a Buddha has to change his posture because he's got back pain, that means that there's some sort of discomfort, Otherwise we're like a rock and there's no.
I never heard of that actually. The Buddha changing his posture. You read that, or you heard about it?
Yeah, I can't reference, but I can look it up. Actually, yeah, he is known to be, he tells Ananda, I think, or Sariputta, I don't remember which one, that to take
He wants to
over
take a
the
rest
discourse because he has to lie
while
down
he takes a rest.
while he
Yeah,
takes
he
a
wanted
rest
to take some
because of
rest.
his back pain.
I didn't know about the back pain, but um,
Well, even
I
I
do
don't know,
know. I do know that.
maybe there are
I think it was
multiples.
Kassapa, Mahakassapa, or Mahakachayana. But anyways, yeah. Um, so you're saying beyond. So what are you asking?
the the idea of asceticism and achieving a state of being able to withstand suffering, some sort of suffering,
Yeah.
and being affected versus not being affected. And so to like what I'm saying, what I guess the question comes back to, like, is it really more a question of balance and the middle way where, okay, I know my criteria for when is appropriate to say, okay, is enough pain, I'm gonna lie down, or is enough pain, maybe now
Uh-huh.
it's time to eat, rather than starving and unable to meditate because I'm just sick because I'm starving myself to death, or because mosquitoes are eating me alive, or because it's so cold and I'm freezing and maybe what I really need is to go inside for some time. Like, or am I going to try to achieve a state of being superhero where I'm and completely miss the point?
You have to take care of your physical body, and the four requisites chants, as I told you before. They do that. The teachers don't like the idea of fasting. We did a fast, right? but we didn't really do it to like gain enlightenment or anything like that. We just did that sort of as a health thing, you know, where we did a 10-day fast. But the teachers really don't like fasting. And and there's a reason for that, you know, because we need to take care of our body, and we need to eat like on a daily basis, and we need to take care of ourselves so that we can do whatever we need to do to fulfill our monk life. So
I mean, many people would
there's
think that
no,
you're fasting all the time, for example.
yeah, they call it intermittent fasting. You eat one meal a day, and
Yeah.
yeah, but the main thing is, look at me, okay? I'm chunkier than you, so I have a fuller face than you do. I survive, you know, and the Buddha, he prescribed what we need. We should have what we need in order to survive, and we don't need to eat 3 meals a day. These days, I'm more or less eating 1 meal a day, and sometimes I eat 2 meals a day. It depends on my conditions. So when I was on a different property, I had some people who had some food, and I could go there and get some food, and then I could go out on my alms round. So, but right now I don't have a helper living with me. I'm all by myself. I'm in an empty house that's neither rented nor occupied right now, and so I can live off of 1 meal. I have to. I have no choice. And you know what? When you don't have that choice, or like when you devote yourself to the rules and you don't have that choice, this dissatisfaction doesn't really come into play. It you know, after the time comes where I can't eat anymore, I don't feel hungry. And I hope I don't jinx myself, but you know, there was one time I was in the airport, and I didn't get I was in China for 12 hours of a 12-hour layover, and those 12 hours were during the time that we were supposed to get our food, and it was China, and it was like it was a baby airport in China, and we happened to meet some Westerners who happened to have known about the monastery in England under Ajahn Sumedho. And they said, okay, well, we'll give you some, you know, if we see you later on, we'll give you some food. And between the two, there were 2 monks, you know, there was myself and my friend who was part of the Hawaii trip 3 or 4 years ago. And between the two of us, they gave us some graham crackers and some nuts and some flavored water. And then they came back and they gave us a pint of, you know, about this much worth of fried rice from one of the rice shops there. Okay. And so it was, you know, we were finished with we're running out of time, and that's all we had. And I divided it because when monks divide food, okay, especially when it's scarce, we want to give more to the other person. Okay. So I know that if my friend, he was going to divide the food, he would either just dump it all in my bowl, or he would take just a small portion and give me more. So I divided the food, and I was really careful to do it down the middle. Okay. And even so, I gave him what I perceived was the bigger portion. You know, he got a few grains of rice extra or something like that, because I didn't want the guilt of, you know, taking more, and I wanted to be fair. And I know that if he gave it to me, if he divided it, he would give me way more. So I divided it. And we ate the food, and then boom, we weren't hungry anymore. I don't know how it works. I mean, we had like almost nothing. And then we had to split it. between the two of us. And after the time was finished, we weren't hungry. It was satisfying because we didn't have any choices. We had no money, we didn't have any helpers, and that was all the food we had. And we were committed to the rules, and we weren't looking for food anymore because we didn't want to break the rules. And so, you know, if you're committed to the rules, then, and you don't want to break them, then it can, it's not as difficult psychologically as you might think. I don't know, I've been doing it for 18 years. So I don't, you know, it's just part of my life.
I've heard people say that discipline gives you freedom.
Yeah, I mean, they've done a lot of the things is that if you don't leave if you have a set regimen, you know, a thing that you're following, and you don't give yourself choices. They've done studies on this. There's a TED conference about having choices makes one miserable.
Yeah.
And they did a study. They did a study where they gave you a choice of pictures, okay, and you got to keep one, okay, and one person and one group, you know, they picked it, they kept it, and that was it, okay. And another group, they said, you know, after 24 hours or after 30 minutes, I forget, after some period of time, you could change your picture. Okay, and a lot of them took a different picture, okay, and then afterwards, like a week later, a month later, or whatever, they said, okay, what's your satisfaction rate? And the people who had no choice were like way more, you know, significantly more happier with their picture or painting, whatever it was, rather than the group that was allowed to exchange it after a certain amount of time.
Sounds like we've just discovered the formula for appreciation. Deprive a person of options and they appreciate what they have.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, like that first story, you know, when the first interview, when I talked about the KFC, I mean, I had no options, and it was great. And I was mixing, you know, ranch dressing on my trail mix, you know, and it was great.
Yeah.
Did you get inspired to take ranch dressing and put it on trail mix after you ate this? after you heard me say that? Probably
sounds like
not.
I would do something like that. If I had nothing, I would do that for sure. I remember there were times when I was little that I was hungry and I had nothing, like I had no money, you know. I was like probably 11 years old. I remember after school programs, I was after school hungry, I had no money, and I was go to this community center, and in the cafeteria you could get as condiments in the condiment section, they would have free crackers that, you know, you crumple up into your soup or whatever. And along the crackers, they would also have ketchup, mayo, mustard, whatever. So I would take those crackers and I would put some ketchup on it and make little sandwiches. And then I would mix the mustard with the mayo and whatever. I don't remember. Actually, yeah, ranch. They had some ranch. They had some blue cheese dressing. I like the blue cheese.
But you didn't have a choice, right?
And right, there was, yeah. And actually, it also reminds me, you know, like one of the least satisfying experiences is going to a restaurant and having a menu that's page after page after page, and there's like 100 choices on every page, and I'm just looking at it, I'm just like, okay, and I just turn. Usually when that happens, I go to the waitress or waiter and I say,
and you say, what do you like?
What do you like? Can you tell me what to get? Because having choices makes me unable to choose anything.
Yeah. And you know what? You know, sometimes people say, well, what do you want? And I say, I don't want to say anything, because if I say something, I usually feel guilty, because I want a meal, and people might have in mind that they might be interested in getting me a granola bar, and they're like, "What do you want?" They might be saying, "Pick a granola bar" or something like that, and
Uh,
and I'm thinking meals, and one time this lady was pressing me. She's like, "What do you want? What do you want? What do you want?" And I was at the farmer's market, and I said, "Well, it would be good to have some carbohydrates, with all this fruit and vegetables that I'm eating." It was a farmer's market. So if I could get maybe a small thing of bread from the bread thing, from the bread tent or whatever, that would be good. And before I refused 5 times to say this, and she was pressing me, pressing me, pressing me. And then I said, "Yeah, how about some bread?" And I gave a good reason why. And then she's like, "Well, I'm in a rush, and the bread line is always so big because there's always a line at the bread place." And I said, "This is why I don't say what I want." And even when I'm getting a Subway, she says, "Do you want cheese?" She says, "What type of cheese do you want? You have an order for cheese on your sandwich." And I said, whatever cheese you like, and what type do you want? Do you want sauce on it? And I said, "If you like sauce, I like sauce." And it works that way, and that lady is the lady looks out for me now. So she people come in there, and she's suggesting, maybe get a different sandwich than the usual sandwich to give me a different flavor or something like that. And she's now organizing things to maybe try to make things taste better. And but it's all food. Sometimes I say things, like, "Yeah, sure, you can." If they say, "Do you want this or this or this?" then sometimes I pick. But a lot of the times I don't. I say, what you like is what I like, or something like that. But um, but sometimes for health reasons I might say something. So that's it's good. It's good to not say anything. And one time I was at this little Menehune. It's called Menehune Mart. It's like a little 7-Eleven type shop. And he says, "What do you want?" And I said, "You choose." And he says, "Oh, come on, tell me." And so he ended up giving me a meal, and so that was really good. And it was 13. It listed the calories too. It was 1,300 calories, and that was pretty big meal. So yeah, when you have no choices, and then you become appreciative, because that's what you're going to eat.
well, I'm gonna have to see. That's the challenge of freedom is that even if,
Yeah.
as a layman, I could take up a discipline. Well, okay, even as a monk, you can renounce monasticism, right? So, we are ultimately free to do whatever we want and face the consequences, right?
Yeah.
But unless we see and understand deeply, the reason why we would take up a certain discipline, and deeply understand how it would benefit us, it's really difficult to actually keep the discipline going if you don't see constantly or don't remember why you're doing what you're doing, if it's not fresh, right? Because the mind will always find a reason to do the pleasant thing if it doesn't, if it cannot see if it cannot see why
And
it's doing.
that's one of the benefits of going for alms, is you always You always see the benefit. You know it's the bare necessity, and you get confronted with that every day. And it's good practice. But the Buddha never required it. He said that at that time they had monasteries, and they fed thousands of monks. And the Buddha says, if you want to do it, you can, but it's not required. And so there was, as time grew on, it was easier to become a monk, and still people were, I'd like to think were getting enlightened even with these softer conditions. But the monks early on who had the parami to be some of the first disciples of the Buddha, they didn't have a lot of choices, and they automatically knew what it was like to be a monk because of their past life experiences of being monks repeatedly again and again and again in their associations with the Bodhisattva before he became Buddha. They had followed him from lifetime to lifetime, especially these chief disciples of the Buddha that we read about, the very famous. I mean, he's had thousands and thousands and thousands of disciples, but they only write about the very best, and then they become enlightened very quickly. It's like a Facebook page, The suttas are like a Facebook page. We only hear about the good. We only hear about the good stories. We don't. You see someone's Facebook page. They're always in love with their wife. But marriage is not like that. And or maybe it is, but certainly the Facebook page is distorting things. It's only showing the best. And the suttas, they're only gonna write about the incredible stories, and then they're gonna paraphrase, the long, 12 years. They just write, after 12 years or after he worked long and hard, he achieved what those who have gone forth should rightly achieve, and it could be 12 years, could be 20 years of struggle. But we just hear this little stock phrase, and then we're like, oh yeah, and then he got enlightened. So.
All right. Well, we've gone on for a while. Again, it's maybe for next time I want to do a little change of topics. We've talked about the lifestyle of a monk and why it's beneficial, why it is the way it is. I'm curious to hear for next interview what you think is right lifestyle for a layman. What is the higher life for a layman? This is something I'd like to talk about in the next interview. So maybe you can prepare for that. I'll think of the most difficult questions for you.
Okay. Yeah, I can think of some suttas, and there's one sutta for the advice for lay people. And,
okay. Well, don't spill all the beans yet.
And
and if you wanna see that interview for the viewers of this, make sure to subscribe. And and so you don't miss the next interview. This is gonna apply to your situation, because if you're a layman, if you're a lay woman, this is what we want to know: how to make the best of it for ourselves, if we're not monks or nuns. All right, thank you, Bhante.
Okay, you're welcome.